A smell hits you, just for a second. Rain on hot pavement, maybe, or a specific kind of smoke, or someone's perfume passing by on the street. And without deciding to, without even wanting to, you're somewhere else. You're 8 years old again. You're in a kitchen that doesn't exist anymore, standing next to someone whose voice you can barely remember the exact sound of. In a house that got sold or torn down years ago. It lasts 2 seconds. Then it's gone, and you're standing on a sidewalk again, slightly disoriented, blinking, wondering what just happened to you and why it hit so hard for something so small. Here's a strange question nobody ever actually asks. What if the very first human being who ever felt that exact sensation had absolutely no word for it? No idea what was happening inside their own chest. No framework for it at all. Just a physical ache with no name attached to it, no explanation, nothing to call it except pain that arrived from nowhere. Let's go back and find that person. Imagine you're leaving the only home you've ever known, and you know, with complete certainty, that you are never coming back. Not a trip. Not a season away. Gone. Permanently. In a way you're still too young to fully understand the weight of. The valley your family has lived in for generations has stopped giving you enough food. The river is drying earlier every year, the herds have moved on chasing grass that no longer grows here, and staying any longer means watching the people you love slowly starve through a winter nobody survives. So the group moves, because moving is survival, and standing still is a slow, quiet kind of death. You walk for days. Then weeks. The land changes under your feet, the smells change, the sound of the wind changes, and at some point, without any warning at all, you realize you can't quite picture the exact shape of that mountain behind your old home anymore. You know it was there. You know exactly how it felt to look up and see it every single morning of your life, the specific color it turned at sunrise. But the memory has started to blur at the edges, softening like a shape underwater. And there's no way to check it, no way to walk back and look again. No way to fix the picture in your mind before it fades any further away from you. That ache, that specific physical heaviness in your chest that has no obvious cause and no obvious cure, thousands of years later, we would eventually give it a name. You're not just remembering the valley. Your body is reacting to it. Your chest tightens. Your breathing changes slightly, without your permission. The memory isn't staying politely inside your head. It's happening to your body all over again, the same way it did the first time, just quieter now. Nostalgia. But here's the part almost nobody knows. That word is shockingly new. A Swiss physician named Johannes Hofer coined it in 1688, stitching together two Greek words, nostos, meaning homecoming, and algos, meaning pain. He wasn't writing poetry. He was documenting a medical condition. Swiss mercenary soldiers serving far from home, sometimes for years at a stretch, were developing strange symptoms doctors couldn't otherwise explain. Insomnia, loss of appetite, fever, and sometimes even death. Doctors traced all of it back to one cause. They missed home so intensely that their bodies seemed to be shutting down over it. For over a century afterward, nostalgia wasn't considered a feeling you simply pushed through. It was considered a genuine disease, one that physicians actually listed on death certificates, something you could quite literally die from. Which means for the overwhelming majority of human existence, hundreds of thousands of years, people were almost certainly feeling this exact sensation. This exact chest-deep ache, and not one of them had a word to explain what was happening to them. Just the ache. Unnamed, unexplained, carried in complete silence, generation after generation, with no diagnosis and no name to make it feel any less strange. So how do you even hold on to a memory when you have nothing to write it down with, nothing to press it into? Nothing that will still exist the way you remember it years from now? No paper, no writing, no photographs, no mirrors, no calendar to mark off exactly how many seasons had passed since you last stood in the place you missed. The only storage device you had access to was the inside of your own skull, already degrading the second you tried to use it, softening details, blending faces. losing a little more of an exact voice with every year that passed. So people did the only thing they actually could. They spoke it out loud over and over until it stuck somewhere outside their own single, fragile, mortal memory. Somewhere, it might survive them. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer communities have documented something remarkable about nighttime. Fireside conversation. During the day, talk is almost entirely practical. Resources, disputes, logistics, and who found what and where. But at night, gathered around the fire, the overwhelming majority of conversation shifts to stories, songs, and shared memory, sometimes the same stories told again and again across an entire lifetime. The firelight itself seems to change what people are willing to say out loud, softening the space enough for the past to come pouring back out, voices lowering, faces leaning in closer than they would during the day. That fire wasn't just warmth, it was the only photo album anyone had. Every story repeated was a memory getting copied one more time before it could fully disappear. Refined slightly with each retelling, a detail added here, a detail softened there, passed from an older mouth into a younger memory, kept alive the only way it possibly could be, through repetition and love, night after night, until the person telling the story and the person listening to it both knew it well enough to carry it forward themselves. And there's an even deeper layer to this, one that changes how you should think about some of the oldest human burial sites ever discovered. At Kafsa Cave in what is now Israel, archaeologists uncovered human burials roughly 100,000 years old. Bodies deliberately positioned, curled, arranged with clear intention. Some accompanied by red ochre and shell ornaments placed carefully rather than scattered by accident. This wasn't disposal. This was a ritual. Someone chose those objects specifically. Someone knelt down and arranged that body with care instead of simply leaving it where it fell or dragging it somewhere out of sight. Why would you do that for someone who can no longer see, hear, touch, or use any of it ever again? Because the object was never really for them. It was for you. It was a way of saying, out loud or in complete silence, I am not ready to let this memory fade the way everything else eventually does. Grief and nostalgia share the exact same root, the desperate, aching need to hold on to something that time keeps trying to take from you anyway, whether it's a person, a place you'll never walk through again, or a version of yourself that no longer exists and never will again. And it wasn't only the dead people held on to. Archaeologists have found stone tools at some ancient sites made from material sourced hundreds of kilometers away from where the tool was actually used and eventually discarded. Tools that were clearly curated, carried, resharpened, and kept working long past the point where making a fresh one nearby would have been easier. Some researchers believe certain objects like this may have functioned less like disposable equipment and more like heirlooms, carried because of who gave it to you, or where it came from, or what it represented, long after its practical usefulness had genuinely faded. And here's the twist that changes the entire story. Nostalgia wasn't only an emotion, it was almost certainly a survival tool. Think about what actually gets carried inside a nostalgic memory. Remembering exactly where a particular valley held water even in the driest years, a detail that could save an entire group's life if the drought ever repeated itself. Remembering which cave kept a family safe during a brutal winter 3 seasons ago, and which one flooded and had to be abandoned. Remembering the specific route an ancestor once took to reach a distant, food-rich coastline, described in enough detail over enough retellings that someone who had never walked it themselves could still follow it. Remembering which plants made a sick child recover and which ones made things worse, learned once, at great cost, and never allowed to be forgotten. None of that information was written down anywhere. It only survived because someone felt something powerful enough attached to it to keep telling the story, and someone else felt something powerful enough to keep listening, night after night, for years. The ache of missing something wasn't a design flaw sitting uselessly inside the human brain. It was the exact emotional mechanism that made sure critical, life-saving knowledge didn't die the moment the person who learned it died too. Groups that felt this pull strongly, that couldn't simply let the past dissolve and vanish without a fight, were quietly more likely to remember the things that kept them alive the next time the same conditions repeated themselves generations later. Which brings us to why a single smell can still do this to you today, instantly, without permission, more powerfully than almost anything you see or hear. Your sense of smell takes a shortcut through the brain most people never learn about. A scent can reach the parts responsible for emotion and memory, the amygdala and the hippocampus, before you've even consciously realized what you're smelling at all. There's barely a filter in between, barely a delay, which is why a scent can drag you backward in time before your conscious mind has caught up, faster than a sound, faster than an image, faster than a single spoken word ever could manage. This isn't a modern glitch in your brain, some accidental wiring mistake evolution forgot to clean up. This connection is ancient, and it very likely served a real, practical purpose long before anyone needed it to trigger a wave of unexpected emotion on a random sidewalk decades later. The smell of a particular plant might have meant water nearby, worth remembering instantly and without hesitation. The smell of smoke a certain way might have meant danger, or might have meant home, depending entirely on which fire it came drifting from and how far away you were standing. Your ancestors needed scent memory to be instant and involuntary, because in their world, hesitating even a few seconds to correctly place a smell could occasionally be the difference between finding safety and walking straight past it into something far worse. You inherited that exact wiring. You just use it now mostly to miss a kitchen that doesn't exist anymore. So when did ancient humans start feeling nostalgia? Almost certainly, far earlier than any word ever existed to describe it. The very first time a human being walked away from a home they'd never see again and felt that specific physical heaviness settle into their chest for reasons they couldn't explain to themselves, nostalgia was already alive inside them, quietly doing its job, making absolutely sure that whatever they were leaving behind wouldn't disappear from human memory completely. Writing didn't create memory. Photographs didn't create memories. Neither did paintings or letters or any of it. They just gave an already ancient system a new place to store itself, a new container for something that had been running inside the human body for far longer than any of those inventions have existed. Memory was humanity's first technology, built long before fire, long before stone tools, running quietly inside every single person who has ever lived and lost something they couldn't get back. Every parent who outlived a child, every traveler who never saw their valley again, every person who has ever caught a smell on the wind and had to stop walking for a second. And that ache you felt on the sidewalk a few minutes ago over a smell you couldn't even fully explain, the one that pulled you back into a kitchen that doesn't exist anymore. That's not a glitch. That's the same ancient system still running inside you, exactly the way it always has, exactly the way it kept your ancestors alive. The first human who ever missed home had no word for what they were feeling. No name for the ache, no explanation, nothing to call it except pain that arrived from nowhere. But you understood them completely, the moment that smell stopped you in your tracks.